Welcome to the Wholehearted podcast, where we believe that the life you long for, the life better than you dreamed, is accessed through the heart. I'm here, as always, with the best, with the one, with the only, my co-host, Shannon White.
Thank you.
Who is adorned in white.
I am in white. We figured out my rapper name a little earlier, but that's another podcast.
Yeah, AKA, we'll leave that to mystery. So we're kind of wrapping up here the 7 skills of Jesus. Our last episode, we talked about a brave sibling. And now we want to talk about, what does this mean? How do we actually move forward and kind of bring all of the skills together? So today you're going to leave with kind of the combined knowledge of all 7 skills. We would recommend that you go back through all the skills, but today is kind of a bonus because you're going to get a little taste of all 7 in this episode here today. Now, you know what the purpose of life is, Shannon?
I would love to know.
Well, it isn't. Sometimes the best way to discover what something is to tell what it's not. Mm-hmm. It isn't having the family of your dreams. It's not about having the degree of your choice. It's not about your career. It's not about the accolades that may come with that. It's not about finding your place of passion in this world. The true goal and purpose of this life is union with God. Mm-hmm. Unity with God. We find Jesus actually praying for this 24 hours before his crucifixion. And John chapter 17, he asks, and to paraphrase, he says, Father, make them one as you and I are one. Mm-hmm. Them and me and you make us one. And so the purpose of our existence is union with God. And that can only really happen when we have union with him and union within. Mm-hmm. And so the wholehearted journey takes all 7 skills of Jesus, how he stayed wholehearted in a heartbreaking world, and it allows us to grow more united within, more integrated within and with God. Mm-hmm. And that is really the whole goal of this life.
Mm-hmm. I think about Jesus with the Pharisees. I mean, his major message was, it's not about what you do. It's not about the rules. It's not about behavior. And they often just couldn't see past that. They were doing what they knew was right, but it wasn't enough because it didn't reach the heart. Yeah.
It's like the old evangelical line that's, it's not about religion. It's about a relationship with God. Mm-hmm. So in that, it's this greater understanding of who God is and who we are as our authentic selves and who he created us to be. This journey is a relationship, but it is the most fascinating thing. And one day we will leave this life, this earth suit that we're in, and it's all preparation for that union of making our hearts whole within and making our hearts one with our Creator. Mm-hmm. And so it is hugely important, and it is a major setup for what we will experience in the life to come.
Mm-hmm. And it makes life make sense. We were saying earlier, I just don't know what unbelievers do with all of this when I would get to such a place where I would say, what is the purpose of it all? But with God, it makes sense.
Yeah, the pain, the trials, the growing, the maturing.
Even the purpose of life.
Yeah, and
why are we here?
It makes sense out of our pain. Mm-hmm. One of the things when I was going through some of the most painful moments that I write about in the Wholehearted Journey book, this was my mantra. This is what I would say over and over. There's purpose in my pain. Mm-hmm. There is purpose. I don't understand what this purpose is. Someday I will understand it. I don't understand this, but there is purpose in my pain. And it is only when there's a creator involved, when there's someone, a dynamic that's greater than you. And for the Christian, it's a loving creator. It's a creator that would love so much that would allow Jesus to come so that we could see God with skin on. And to allow him to be ripped apart, so to speak, to be crucified and beaten. That God is saying to us, as much as a God could die, he has been dying for us for eternity. I mean, just think about him creating a universe for us, him creating a planet for us, a nursery, so to speak. I know when my kids were born, we decorated their rooms and we got it all prepared with a crib, him preparing this place. I mean, just like a loving father, he has been dying for us. And as every parent knows, right, you kind of die when you have kids. Your schedule dies, your me time dies, your wallet dies. Like all of that.
I've become a mom of a competitive gymnast. No truer words have ever been spoken.
Yes, the money that it takes to be a gymnast or competitive cheer. Oh my gosh, you might as well. I mean, it's a college fund.
Life.
Yeah, it's a double college fund if they do competitive cheer or some of those sports. Competitive sports, parents know about that.
But back to what you were saying a minute ago about, finding pain in your purpose. Purpose in your pain. Purpose in your pain. Sorry. Back to what you were saying a minute ago about finding purpose in your pain. They've recently added a step to the grieving process, which is exactly that. If we can understand the purpose of all of that, and that's, again, psychology catching up with God's truth. Yeah. Romans 8:28 says, I will use everything for your good. And if we trust that, it does bring so much purpose to pain.
Yeah, when one of my psychology classes I was in, they were talking about one therapy. You're probably familiar with it, but it is the therapy of the other person. So especially they use it a lot with husband and wife or relationships, but it's to say, okay, what if there was a third person who was watching our conversations, seeing our relationship unfold? It's taking that position to gain perspective on what that looks like, which is just basically saying, okay, what was God thinking right now on our conversation? Is it all about me? Is it other-centered? And
it's really hard to get out of the self in that particular theory. I haven't heard of that. But yeah, if you're gung-ho on your own perspective, I think that's where we're like, let's go to truth. Let's go to God on what we should do with this.
Yeah. And
I don't see that going well with a lot of couples relying on self.
Yeah. But it also leads back to IFS that you were talking about in last episode, where literally you're saying, okay, younger parts of me, the exile, the prodigal, and also the mature present me, the firefighter in IFS, and the Father, there's this whole saying, okay, Father, what is your perspective on what is going on my mature present me and the younger places that have faced trauma and the integration between that? What is your perspective on that? It is brilliant. And again, I say it again this episode, when science catches up with the Bible, it's insane.
So true. It's so true. The Father as the manager, which really in that theory, you're basically saying, let God manage what's going on between us. Let's go back to Scripture as our ultimate truth if we're, as a couple, not seeing eye to eye.
My mind is being blown. But bringing it back to the purpose of everything, it's union and oneness with Him, with God, and within. And so this is what the 7 skills are helping us to do. And this is why Jesus came, lived, died, resurrected, ascended, was so that our hearts could be made whole. He came to heal the brokenhearted. And so taking this step by step, I thought we could just go through the skills, the 7 skills real quickly, and kind of just show the way that a heart is made whole. Let me just give one preface to this. Even for Jesus, it is not easy to make a heart whole. And here's why. Because Jesus has to take a divided heart and speak to both places to bring them together. He did this very well, and Jesus has this way of saying one thing that speaks to more than one group of people. Remember when he had the coin and the Pharisees had come to him in the temple and said, hey, should we pay taxes? And Jesus said, give me a coin. Someone gives him a coin in the crowd. He says, whose face is on this? They say Caesar. He says, well, then give to Caesar what is Caesar, and give to God what is him. And what he was saying to the crowd who were burdened by taxes, he's saying, listen, give to Caesar what's Caesar's. And then he says it to all the people who had heard it from religious leaders who were like those Pharisees. He says, and don't forget to pay your tithe, right? Like the genius of Jesus, he's saying, listen, he speaks to the overburdened crowds who are losing heart. Mm-hmm. He calls them in, and then he also buffets and kind of like mic drops on the Pharisees, saying, but listen, they were speechless. They didn't know what to say. They were trying to entrap him. And so he has to do the same thing with our own hearts, our mature present us that is usually ashamed of some of those younger places or traumatic experience we had when we were younger.
It reminds me of the woman caught in adultery, where he says, you are forgiven, go and sin no more. Right? Yeah. So it's not a either or, but it's a both and.
And you know what sin is when he says that? Sin actually, when it's translated, means missing the mark. Mm-hmm. Like an archer not hitting the bullseye. Well, what is the bullseye? The bullseye is perfect love. That is who God is, right? Mm-hmm. Like he is perfect love. And so us humans, we tend to love imperfectly. And generally when we don't have perfect love, when it's lust or self-centered or it's not perfect, we miss the mark of who we were created to be, but it also is destructive. The wages of sin is death. It's destructive. It is not, the woman caught in adultery is looking for something that she ultimately won't find in this other relationship.
Right.
And so Jesus is saying, hey, I've rescued you today, but I also want you to be able to walk into real life and not be looking for counterfeits, looking for something that's transcendent and something that is lacking and is not transcendent.
I want you to be wholehearted.
I want you to be wholehearted. So how do these skills build on top of each other? Very first foundational skill, number one skill, Jesus had it, we have to have it, is a beloved child identity. He knew his father. He knew his father loved him. I mean, literally when he was baptized, his father says, this is my son who I'm well pleased. The Message version says, this is my son who I'm proud of, this is him. This is my boy. Look at my son. And we have to understand.
Which really goes back to, I know the trauma you share in your book, that if we have that as our foundation, we can completely build off that and become wholehearted. So, but if we don't have that identity as our foundation, we can't get there.
Yeah. And Jesus actually came to let us know how much we were loved. And in John 17, he prays for the future believers, who's us. And he says, Father, let them know that you love them as much as you love me. Look, check out John 17, 23 through 25.
Let that resonate on the days you feel shame. Yeah.
And if God said, this is my son who I'm well pleased, think about how he feels about you, his daughters, his sons. You are a beloved child. And so this has to be our foundation. Not an enabling kind of love, but a love that says, I am with you no matter what you do, no matter where you go, no matter where you look for real life and all the wrong places. I'm for you. I'm with you. You are my child, and that can never change. I love you. That's the very first foundation.
Right.
Secondly, we look and we see courage. This life takes courage. Right? We can't stay in our comfort zone and ever hope to grow. I have one friend who says, comfort wants to see you dead.
And I've been listening to some other podcasts and influencers and things like that. And a theme I keep hearing is do it scared, because
Feel the fear and do it anyways.
Do one thing. Actually, my friend went to a John Maxwell training, and it was all about do one thing a day that takes you out of your comfort zone. And what we know about that is that is the best way to build self-esteem, because I took a risk and I'm proud of myself for doing so.
Yeah, and you talk a ton more about that in that episode on Courage Skill 2.
The outcome is not the goal or the measure of success. It's that I tried it. And that is really important because we live in such a world that values productivity. Or did you get first place, or, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, I'm a mom of now a competitive gymnast, and I'm always encouraging her to know that this is not your identity. It's something you're good at. And, she was kind of vacillating if she would continue this year. And I'm so proud of her because I really stayed back. Mama Bear didn't put her opinion in, and she came out and said, I think I want to do it. And I just kept pouring into, you are so brave just to try it. Who cares if you ever win? Yeah. But just to try it is pretty cool.
And the other thing I just want to say to our listeners is you cannot compare your life to anybody else's. And you
it's the
doing
thief of
something,
joy, right?
Yeah. And you taking a step forward, may not be what somebody else's step forward. And here's the other truth. You can do things messy and awkward. That's how we start to learn to walk. And nobody is a master the first time they do it. So you've got to start with something that looks awkward and that is difficult, and it becomes, the more you do it, it becomes natural.
Is it Michael Jordan that got cut from his middle school
high school basketball team? Yes.
That's crazy.
It's wild. So second skill, courage, built on top of the first skill, which is that identity of being a beloved child of God. Number 3, spiritual smarts. We live in a spiritual war zone. And I think this is part of the reason of why being a Jesus follower is so important, is that the world makes a whole lot more sense when you know that there's an enemy and you know that you have got to be on guard.
Who's a fallen angel who has been there in the trauma, the reason for the trauma that you have. And so he knows where we're most vulnerable. And
he's been around to see generation after generation after generation after generation. And he knows people pretty well. He knows how to work it, and he knows what your family line is kind of like. And this one is just like the aunt that we just dealt with. Let's try some of the same stuff on them.
Yep. Yes. And so he knows where we're vulnerable, and that's usually where our trauma is, likely to happen, because that's where we're most vulnerable.
And just like St. Peter, who the enemy used Peter to try to speak to Jesus to not go to the cross. Remember, Jesus turns around, that famous line, "Get behind me, Satan." He's basically saying, hey, I hear you, Satan, speaking through someone who's close to me. So if the enemy can influence St. Peter, he can influence anyone.
For sure.
And so family members, parents sometimes, friends.
Generational sin is very
teachers,
real.
Bosses speak and are influenced by an enemy to speak the same thing over and over. And generally that wound that they keep hitting again and again and again, at the bottom of that wound is your genius and the gift that you give the world. And the enemy specifically targets that. And so part of the healing process is saying, okay, if I'm wounded and I've had trauma, it's probably I can discover what my gift, what my genius is, who I am, and shine that light brighter, but it has to go through pain.
That goes into exactly what I said last podcast, right? I was a deep feeler growing up, and often that was filtered to be a little too intense.
Wow.
And actually,
that's
at the bottom of how the Lord created me. And if I didn't feel deeply, I wouldn't really be able to empathize and help people.
Yeah, like being a therapist and being able to perceive in the moment what someone is feeling and what they've probably gone through, even like through body language, all of that.
And God's
It's
so
a
good.
gift.
I went to college actually to be a teacher. And, I'm pretty sure I'm a 1 on the Enneagram. I vacillate a little between a 1 and a 9, but they're so close. And for a 1 to change their plan, it's a pretty much a miracle. But God just kept saying, I think what you love about teaching is helping people. And God bless all the teachers out there. I don't think I would have made it, because that boss babe in me is like,
Yeah.
that's a lot. So anyway, God kind of changed my direction at Appalachian State, go Mountaineers, and took me into the field of sociology and psychology. And I'm just amazed by that, because I'm also a J on the Myers-Briggs, that if you know Myers-Briggs, it's you have a plan, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I'm just so thankful to God to kind of take me out of myself, even in that.
But see, that leans on skill too, which is courage, right? Like you did something out of your comfort zone, following God, following this desire. And so if we're going to be wholehearted, it's built on that beloved child identity, but that gives you courage, because when your father, your heavenly parent, is the creator of the universe, it kind of makes you stand up a little straighter. Okay, God loves me, and I don't care what you say, but I know I'm God's child, right? That provides that courage. Courage then allows you to head out, but then being spiritually smart, which is skill 3, allows you to know you're going to have some resistance. You're going to have some things, and also not only resistance.
That's not God against me. That's the evil in this world, right? Because we often ask, why does God? I think He allows pain, but He's not the creator of it.
And then that allows us to say, okay, so I've had this message spoken to me, and I've even agreed with that message. And so I'm going to agree with what God says about me, and not what all these people have said about me, or not what the thoughts that have come to me. And you can break those agreements, break those internal contracts, and say, okay, I'm not just full of feeling, right? Like in your circumstance, this is a gift of mine. Yes, I'm going to develop my logical, which anyone can develop that if you're a feeler, or vice versa. So that is being spiritually smart and understanding that there's an enemy, and an enemy can't speak through people.
Absolutely.
Skill number 4, as we're building here, is a mature love, and it's learning how to love people where they're at in a mature way. Jesus rescuing the woman caught in adultery, loving on lepers, being kind and tender to children.
What a world we would have if we would practice that, even as Christians.
Yes.
Meeting people where they are, and not watering down the gospel, but also being the gospel. And I think we're kind of missing that. We're in such a divisive culture of we're either or, and I think the truth lies somewhere in between.
Well, I think we're all at different areas of maturity in our life. So you could be incredibly spiritually mature, but be emotionally and relationally immature. So
the Pharisees, right?
Yes. So you have somebody who is extremely strong and gifted in one area, maybe a 60-year-old in that area, but they're a 5-year-old in their relationships. And so maturely loving people is being able to not reject them when you see their weakness. It's to be able to see it and then love them appropriately, which means creating some boundaries and saying, okay, like, you can come on my front porch, but I'm not inviting you into the living room. Like, here, I'm good with talking with you out here, but I don't think I don't think that area is going to serve either of us very well if I let you into that place of my heart.
I talk about like an inner circle and an outer circle, and Jesus was a great example of that.
Yes.
He had, his 12 and then his 3. I think we talked about
and
that
he had the
in
120
different podcasts.
Right?
Yep.
And so Judas, we talked about that, and go to skill 4, that episode. And Judas, he was in the 12, but he wasn't in the 3. So you'll want to love, but yet Jesus was so relationally generous to Judas. He even washed his feet before, even after he had participated in his assassination plot. He washes Judas's feet. He was so generous to him, but he also saw him. It wasn't a surprise. He was able to dip the bread in wine and hand it to Judas. He gave him communion, but he also identified his betrayer. He saw Judas for who he was, and he was able to navigate that and love him maturely.
Just had a very random thought, but how amazing would it be when we would decided who the next presidential candidates would be if one would wash the other one's feet? You know, we're on the same team, but it's so many times feels like we're not.
So divided. We all need a little bit more of that Jesus mature love, for sure.
And I think Christians can fall into that, not to take this politically, but again, this way or that way, or we're actually just called to be Christian, and what does that mean? And I think we need values on both sides to meet God's overarching purpose.
Yeah, and our Jesus, following Jesus is first before whatever political ideology or identification we find ourselves in. So, y'all, if you're a believer, whether you lean towards the elephant or the donkey, you're a believer first and we follow Jesus. Those are secondary at best. Anyways, moving on to skill number 5. Speaking of opposition is navigating your human antagonists. And y'all, we're going to have those human antagonists. And that is part of navigating this wild world. And if you develop mature love and you can see people not with selective sight, or not with selective sight in reverse, where selective sight is just seeing the best in people and not seeing their weaknesses or immaturities. And the reverse of that is just usually it's when we get hurt or betrayed by them. We only see their negatives and we don't see their strengths. Developing that is going to help us to navigate humans better. I have John Eldridge. He says it like this. He says, every human is booby-trapped. There's something inside of them that will be triggered. And a defense mechanism will come out. And so you have to know that you are dealing with humans.
I mean, I think your book where you got really betrayed by other people in ministry is a great example of that, because you really just hope all Christians are, going to be kind and honest and for each other's benefit, and it's just not the case.
No, it's not. And I mean, we live in a country where the founding fathers said, hey, we are all, most of them were believers, but they're like, we're all self-interested. And so we got to have checks and balances. And so in our own life, I'm not trying to go political again, but those checks,
Joel Johnson for president.
No. And I am a political science major and I graduated law school. So my brain is
vice president.
Can you be my vice president? I would have to be running for president for that to happen. And I don't, that's not a plan in my,
you never know, Joel.
Well, if I will have to see the writing on the wall, I will have to see "We the people of the United States" written on the wall. And it might even have to say, you, the person, Joel, are going to do this. For now,
we'll stick to writing books.
I'll stick to helping people get closer to God. That's my goal here. And to be healed and whole, all of that, wholehearted. So that's the next thing we have to add that in. Number 6, unveiled face. Who you are on the inside, rediscovering the authentic one is so invaluable to becoming wholehearted. Disassociating with the self-destructive self-destructive areas of our personality, or just the limiting areas of our personality, being able to navigate that.
Yeah, in a practical way, how has your hurts and traumas created a mask or defense mechanisms for you to self-protect? And once those start to be healed, hopefully, then you're closer to the wholehearted. I heard speaker on marriage this week, and I think her philosophy is a little simplistic, but her basis is she was actually talking to women whose husbands refuse to go to therapy, which is actually very common. And we have a lot of reasons why that is. One being men tend to do better when they're side by side versus face to face. And, it's going to completely, trigger my core question of I'm not good enough or I'm not man enough. But she was basically saying, women, if you heal yourself and then you join him on his island and you don't react to his triggers, it's going to encourage him to heal. A little too simplistic for me because I think
you are so sophisticated, Shannon.
Well, it's just more complex than that. If your husband is doing behaviors that have nothing to do with how you're reacting to him, that doesn't really fit.
Okay, did you just see how masterful that was, that diversion of my comment and kindly diverting it into a different direction? You are a master. You are the master of all things psychological.
My favorite ever was Boss Babe of Therapy. Thank you.
Boss Babe of Therapy. Yeah, you'll have to go back a few episodes to hear that one.
But I think it ties into what you were saying of like if she does her work, and I use this with couples, if you change the dance and the part of the fear cycle that we've talked about in previous podcasts, he's either going to have, I think it's one of two choices. He's either going to choose to heal and say, wow, this feels different and better and good, and I want to become wholehearted, or he's going to do the path of death type behavior and continue down a road, and then unfortunately she may have a decision to make. But it is about changing our core and our self and healing that will then hopefully influence our partner.
Yeah, and ultimately you can't change anybody else.
Right.
And so whether you do the work and you see the transition in other people and more health and more growth, or whether you do the work and you don't see that, doing the work has so many benefits to your life, and the life that's better than your dreams cannot be accessed until you do that work.
And that's what was kind of an aha moment for me reading this last chapter. Is one question I've always had is, if you do the healing work and you really know your triggers and you have good boundaries, but you're still in relationships, such as with family, that are still triggering in some ways, or just have not done the work, or maybe there's just still some ways you're triggered, then what? And so I think what your book says is, when you're wholehearted, not that you're not ever affected by other things other people do or say, but again, that beloved child identity, the courage, the spiritual smarts, all the things that say, you know what, that really didn't have anything to do with me, because I can see it more clearly now, even though it felt very personal. And that was a really aha moment, is you're not dependent on anyone else's change or healing. It'd be nice, but it's not really the road a lot of us are privy to with our families.
Yeah. And you're not hustling to get other people's validation, or you're not wanting it more for someone else than they want it for themselves, which is exhausting. And when you just say, all right, I'm responsible for my life and doing my work in my life.
And if I'm seeking the Lord, and at the end of the day saying, please shine light on where I'm missing things, or maybe I messed up, and you're genuine in that, and you don't feel conviction, the Holy Spirit's job, then I think you're walking wholeheartedly. And again, God is saying, let me have them, let me deal with them.
The idol of control.
Take control off of of being an idol in your life, basically.
Yeah.
Because we want to often control how other people treat us.
Yeah, that's
out
powerful.
of our own wounding.
Wow. Skill number 7. Brave sibling. And really, the older mature, or the present maturer part of us has to be brave to open the door to the younger wounded places the places that have been traumatized, the prodigal places, and to allow some of those memories and that pain to come back in, to integrate ourselves, to heal, to grieve that pain, to forgive those who caused that pain, to forgive ourselves if we knew better, or just sometimes we don't know better, but we feel like we should have known better, but you can't do better till you know better, right? And finally, let God love us really good in the place of our wound. Those are that's the process to reintegrating, and it really takes your brave older sibling part of you, if you will, to open the door to that. If not, you're just living in self-rejection, self-shame, self-hatred of those younger places.
And you're really saying that Jesus is that brave sibling within us, right?
Well, Jesus is the bravest and the eldest, but we see him modeling that, and our mature present self becomes more kind, more brave,
More Jesus-like.
more Jesus-like. So the younger places within us, we don't look back and we say, man, you should have done something different, and your father wouldn't have left. And we go back to say, listen, you were just 10 or whatever age you were just young. You did great. And that self-speak then changes. So we become brave as we follow Jesus.
That makes sense. And I've never given a lot of thought, but man, that's powerful to how our siblings have said things that really stick with us and wound us.
Our actual biological siblings. Yeah.
Right. I know you talk about that in your book, and I've said it before, but some of the most complex relationships I've ever seen are brother and brother, sister and sister. It's an interesting dynamic that happens.
Well, I think part of that is such a good metaphor for what happens on the inside of us. For me, it's the brothers. It's the younger brother. The younger traumatic places the prodigal, and then the mature present me, with a Juris Doctorate and who's legally analyzing, well, you did this wrong, and you did this wrong, and you did this wrong, and this is happening, and saying, hold on, time out for a moment. I'm going to be a good older brother to those parts that have been arrested, to those parts that have had trauma that are younger in my past. And I'm going to have better self-speak about that. And I'm going to accept, man, like the 10-year-old, 11-year-old me was a survivor and should have never had to go through the things that 10-year-old went through. But he got me to where I'm at, and to me to celebrate him and to allow him to have the space in my own mind and my own heart and my life to say, no, I needed you. And sometimes you'll actually find me saying now, I'm proud of you. And the younger place, and I remember when I was 10 and 11, I so wanted a father so bad, a father figure in my life. Of course, my father left, my stepfather was abusive. I was looking for that. And in some way now, I am a father figure to the younger trauma places, and I can be more patient, more kind. But that never happens if I don't open the doors to lost memories, to memories that I don't want to think about.
You do your healing work.
And so that is where integration happens, self-integration. And the more we grow integrated with ourselves, the more we can connect with God. And the more we connect with God and grow integrated with God, the more that we can be whole within, because God is the healer of the heartbroken. So it's this upward spiral in God, in ourselves, being healed and whole. So that's where the ultimate brave sibling is Jesus. But as we follow Jesus, we become Christ-like.
Got it.
And so we become more kind and more like Jesus to ourselves. And that's is
awesome.
a powerful truth.
I was thinking when I said the sister thing of Mary and Martha, that so parallels that too.
Well, for you, it's a sister and sister. It's a younger sister in you and your mature present self, who I'm sure if you were to look at your external siblings, there are some parallels. For me, like when I looked at how the mature present me treated those younger places I was kind of ashamed about, or the things I went through, the trauma. I treated my younger places like my two fathers had treated me.
And kind of your brother at some points.
Yeah,
before.
well, my father abandoned me, so I abandoned them to the periphery. I don't want to think about them. My stepfather abused me, and so really my drug of choice was workaholicism, right? So like I'm traveling, speaking to arenas filled with teens on the weekend. I'm having my first child. I wrote my first book. I'm doing all of this stuff, like overworking myself and not really working myself so I don't have to go into the deeper work. And even though it's ministry and it's good and it has all of that, it's for Jesus, right? But it really, Jesus is saying, time out. The integration of your heart, union with God and with yourself, that is the goal of life. And yeah, you can do good things. But that's what I think he's saying in John chapter 7, where he says, hey, you did all this stuff in my name,
and yet
I don't know you.
Yeah. I mean, that idea parallels.
I'm feeling paralyzed right now, actually. That was a pretty somber thought. I moved it to John, that scripture with the sheep and the goats. That's really sombering and paralyzing. But please continue.
I think we're delirious. That thought of productivity parallels Martha so much, and that I can relate to so much too. Like, oftentimes I felt like the one in the family who just kind of did the right thing, the peacemaker, didn't make waves, that kind of thing. But I just love that because I have to challenge the Mary part of me to really sit with Jesus and say, you don't have to do anything to earn his love.
Yeah.
And that's just so neat how the older brother in the prodigal son parable mirrors Martha, and the younger one.
Mary, she was on a different path. Like she was fine and content not to work and to be at Jesus's feet.
Yeah. And Jesus really praises her for that. So again, there's the Bible says there's a time for everything. And I don't think Jesus would have said like she has to sit at my feet 24/7, but it's about the heart. And her heart was like, if I'm in front of Jesus, I'm going to spend time with him and sit at his feet.
That's so good.
And not do all the work of the house. Where I could say, if Jesus showed up today, I might be the one to say, what can I do for you?
And there may be a bit of a prodigal story that happened with Mary and Martha that we don't have privy to. But
there probably was a cat fight after that.
Hey, I've never had a sister, so I'll leave that to your expertise. And so with all of that, union is the goal of life. But not only that, but when your heart is able to go through these 7 skills, it becomes whole. And we believe the life that you long for, the life better than you dreamed, is accessed through the whole heart. And that's why the wholehearted journey is so important. We're ahead of schedule and we're releasing the book October 17th, The Wholehearted Journey.
So exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited. But you don't have to wait for October 17th. You can actually go now and you can start reading now for free on joeljohnson.org. Just join us. You'll get the foreword, you'll get the introduction in chapter 1, and we'd love to give that to you as a gift. If you like what you're reading or you think one of your loved ones would enjoy what the book is about and what you're reading in that free sample, also available prior to October 17th, you can pre-order the ebook off of Amazon. So
exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then we're looking for the new year in 2024 to launch Wholehearted University, which will be all of the things for the wholehearted journey, the films, the online curriculum, the workbook, all of those things. And so you'll be wanting to look for that on wholehearted.university in 2024. We are so excited to see all that God is doing in so many lives. The podcast is just growing and growing by leaps and bounds. And so
Thank you,
more and more,
listeners.
yes, listeners, you guys are sharing it. Please continue to do that. Please continue to invite others. And we're seeing so much freedom happen in so many lives. People who are brokenhearted becoming wholehearted. Thank you for this journey. And Shannon, thank you for all that you have given so freely. In the show notes, all the exercises that people pay hundreds of dollars for and pay you hundreds of dollars for, but you've given it out for free for our listeners.
No problem.
This journey would not be the same without you, for sure.
Thank you. And I would just summarize it. I was at the beach with a family reunion recently, and a really wise Jesus-following uncle said, I think I overheard him in another conversation, and he does a lot of counseling and ministry on the side. He runs a boys and girls club, and he said something so profound but so simple. He said, we can change any behavior, but until we change the heart, nothing else will change. And I think that summarizes the book so well.
Yeah, when the heart changes, you can access the life that you really want. So thank you so much for joining us for another great episode. We'll be back, and we can't wait to be with you till next time.